Good morning and welcome to Cheche, the show where opinion counts, live on Citizen TV. I'm your host, Udwaka Nimo. Now, public coffers are groaning, we're told, under the strain of implementing the Constitution. And so the National Assembly commissioned a report to assess the impact of compliance with the Constitution on the economy and public institutions. The interim audit report was released yesterday, and here to help us understand the findings, we have Reverend Mutava Musiemi, who's the chair of the National Assembly's Budget Committee, Susan Mngeni from the Kenya Institute for Public Research and Analysis, KIPRA, where she's a director on the board, and Dr. Abdirazak Alale Nuno, who's a senior lecturer at Moi University. We also have a panel of one, David McCulley, because Mutagi Njao has been called away to attend to an emergency. But nonetheless, I'm sure David will represent the panel quite robustly. So good morning and welcome. Thank you for being with us. Reverend Musiemi, I'll start with you because you, in your capacity as chair of the Budget and Appropriations Committee, commissioned this socioeconomic audit. Why?
Well, let me get maybe one or two facts started. By the way, thanks for inviting us. It's commissioned by the National Assembly. A
Yes.
recommendation was made by my committee, but it's actually commissioned by the National Assembly. And we did it to basically try to answer the question, how are we implementing the new Constitution? Are the institutions that we put in place working? Are they fighting with each other? Is there coherence in terms of the architecture of the institution? Are we getting value for money? Are there any lessons to learn? And I know it's a bit early, but where are the red flags? So we were also getting a bit concerned with what appeared to be serious misappropriation of funds by the different spending agencies. And we felt that if we don't raise the red flag, as I said, early enough, we might just begin getting into bad habits. And so it was a way of getting us to sort of stop and ask ourselves, are we on track? The Kenyan people gave themselves a new constitution. Those of us who have been elected to implement it, are we being faithful to that, to the promise we made? Is there fidelity to the expectations of the Constitution?
Was there any one event that triggered a discussion that necessitated this audit, commissioning of this audit?
We're sitting in my committee April last year, and we're dealing with the monies that we should give to the county governments. And all of us come from
this division of revenue allocation.
Yeah,
right?
This is last year, and all of us are getting very concerned about the way money is being spent by the different counties, or misappropriated at that time. I think it's beginning to improve. We're also getting a bit concerned about the independent commissions. Indeed, we were going through a process of investigating whether we needed all these commissions, whether there wasn't any duplication, whether we were getting value for money. We're also quietly beginning to ask, you know, what really is the role of the National Assembly vis-a-vis the Senate? What is the role of what is the relationship between the national government and the county government? And so those cracks and those questions are beginning to emerge early last year. And so that is really what certainly drove me as the chairman to begin to get fairly concerned. And therefore, I put the suggestion to the committee, don't you think time maybe has come to ask ourselves whether we shouldn't do some kind of audit? I know it's a bit early, but maybe if we are disciplined, it's something that we should be doing once every 5 years. So at that time, I was saying, let's do an audit now. The country will need another socioeconomic audit in 2020 and another one in 2025 as we settle the new constitution.
Why socioeconomic and not political?
Because political doesn't always tell you the whole truth. Political gets all churned up with noise and the usual battles and mistrust, and it doesn't put the hard facts on the table. And I think we wanted a fairly scientific, independent position.
So what is I mean, I've looked at some of the recommendations and findings and so on. What do you capture from that yourself? Is the implementation of this constitution affordable? Are the structures working? Or is it something we need to go forward thinking of how to throw it away?
That, David, is the right question to the wrong person. These are the guys who did the audit. I think you better ask them.
But you've received it, Mutaba. What is your own finding? Do you think, are you satisfied because it, as you said, it arose from all these concerns? Now you've got the feedback. You know, generally, in a nutshell, not too long, do you think we are on the right track or we need an overhaul, something?
I think the basic framework is very good in the sense that Kenyans wanted devolution. So we want to find out whether the units we put in place are cost effective, whether they are not too many. We want to know whether they are working. Kenyans wanted an independent and effective judiciary. Kenyans wanted fair representation and oversighting and a robust parliament. Kenyans wanted a national executive and a county executive that was independent of elective politics, that could deliver. And I think at this early stage we can say yes, the signs are positive, but there's sufficient reason to worry, in the sense that the public interest and the public good is not as visible, and one is missing the consistency in terms of commitment to the public good. There's still an awful lot of wastage. Sorry.
Sorry, I'm not sure I understand that
being
response.
a little colorful about and careful, let me say, in delivering a verdict. I mean, the question is, there were expectations when people passed this, when Kenyans passed this constitution, of the things you've just enlisted or enumerated. Are they happy? Maybe we'll go back to...
Just a minute. I think your question was clearer than that. The central question we're asking in auditing the Constitution, because you talked about leakage, is whether, if I'm correct, the Constitution is too expensive to implement.
Let me, without seeking to be defensive, say this. This is an interim report. The people who audited the Constitution are here. I think they are the ones you should ask.
Okay. Yeah. We'll come back to you on that.
I'm not sure that I should be here.
Okay, fine.
Well,
you should be here because you commissioned the report.
But I think that question belongs to them.
Right. So, but we will come back to you because you know you will take possession. Yes, we presented the interim report to you. Ms. Mangani, I'll start with you. From where you sit, KIPRA, analyzing public policy. You've prepared this interim report. What are your overall conclusions about the cost of implementing the Constitution on public coffers, public institutions?
Allow me first of all to begin with the TORs. When we were given the TOR by Budget Committee, by Parliament, I'll say so, we looked at them. We were supposed to carry out SocioEconomic Audit, but as you were asking, Mheshimiwa here, you know, there's no way you will interrogate the social or economic impact of the Constitution without also looking at the political impact, because political has got a big bearing on the social and economic aspects of our nation. So we had also to broaden. So we looked at the TOR, so we broadened up. And
you had about 5 TORs, didn't you?
Yeah, we had 5 TORs.
Terms of reference.
The terms of reference. But even before that, what we used as our benchmark, we went back to the reasons as per why Kenyans wanted a new constitution, which most of them were also bearing on the political aspects. One of it, of course, was the concentration. There was concentration of powers in the executive. The second one was the distribution grievances which you had. Then there was the issue of the opening of democratic space. There was the issue of the service delivery. Kenyans wanted enhanced service delivery. And then there was the issue of oversight. Institutions charged with oversight and accountability had failed. And so all those issues, so we used that as a benchmark to see, to compare with the texts, the texts here and say, in terms of text, does it respond to those issues? And I will say that indeed, if you look at the text from the first article to the last article, it does seem to respond to the wishes, to the reasons why Kenyans wanted a new constitution. However, the challenge becomes in implementation, and so that's the spirit. So we are losing it in terms of how we interpret the spirit, how we are implementing. And I think Mheshimiwa has already alluded to it. There are challenges in terms, there are conflicts. I mean, institutions which are charged with implementing the Constitution, we can say it's transitional, but there are still issues here and there. There are conflicts in mandates. There are resistance. You know, we are still, they're resistant to change, to the new order. And not only about leadership, even the people themselves. So there are certain issues you look at it and you say, it's the culture. We don't want to move from the old order to that. So text response, I would say the text responds to the wishes. But the spirit is the problem.
What about the coastal aspect, which is really always the driving question here? Is it affordable?
You see, the manner in which the cost element has been discussed outside there is that is it expensive, for instance? And people will really look at it from a very narrow point of view. Because if you're going to look at it with a view of the increase, of course we have increased institutions. We have now the devolved system of governance. And as you will see in our report, as we continue to discuss, is that we don't have significant rise in the cost. What we have are the wastages. And the wastages are coming in as a result of people, people are corrupt, and people have also refused to change just to do the right thing. But I would say if people have also been saying, talk about cost, they say, okay, we have many independent institutions, without also looking at what are the functions. So if you're going to look at it from a cost point of view, then look at it also from the cost of bad governance. Because this constitution is a transformative constitution, at least if we're just to implement it according to the letter and the spirit. It's supposed to transform our society. It's supposed to give us good governance. But without good governance, also look at it, what is the cost of bad governance?
Okay, Dr. No, let me come to you, because if we're to infer from what Ms. Mangani is saying, is that the cost is manageable, but where it becomes expensive when we look at leakages through corruption, through overlapping mandates. But you've had plenty of experience working with constitutions. Is that your assessment as well? Was there any dissent within the team as you prepared this interim report?
Thank you. I think Susan has said it well. In terms of cost, we were not able to get evidence that indeed the implementation of the Constitution is more expensive than it would have been if we did not have it. What we've noted, however, are the issues of hastened transfer of functions, for instance, to the counties, who lack capacity to implement, who lack capacity to even interpret their mandate and understanding of what they ought to do. And as a consequence of that, there's a lot of pilferage, particularly at the county level, which did not necessarily service very well at the interim level, because we are yet to go to the counties. It's the next phase after now that we are planning to roll out to the counties and find out exactly the level of understanding of their functions and the level of success in terms of benefits being felt by the people. So far, our concentration has largely been at the national level and institutions at the national level. But having said that, there are clearly a number of overlaps even at the national level, particularly in independent commissions, constitutional commissions and independent offices. The reasoning being, some of the institutions seem to play similar roles. I'll just give one example.
Such as?
I'll give one example. The commission, Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, has been split into three. And their mandates and functions are clearly not discernible from where I sit. The Gender Commission and Gender and Equality Commission and the Ombudsman, CAJ, and the remaining bit of the Human Rights Commission really, for me, can actually be played from one platform. If we understand the purpose of commissions, we'll appreciate the need for these commissions really to be also to be made leaner than they are now, because their policy level frameworks are not implementing institutions. The secretariat of every commission does the day-to-day work, and you don't need bloated commissions to be able to deliver services or mandates under particular commissions.
You know, Dr. Nono, I'm still not quite satisfied with the answer you guys are giving with regard to the costs of the Constitution. Because, I mean, that should have been the first question.
Yes.
We had a government, a bureaucracy. We had institutions that existed in the previous Constitution. We have new ones. We multiply those institutions, sometimes fourfold. You won't tell me that you could not extract the cost difference, even bureaucratically, and say, look, in the previous administration, we had this bureaucracy, this commission, these institutions. They cost us this much, even just labor. In the new one, we have this amount. At the cost of personnel alone at government, we're able to tell the costs of the new constitution. How come this could not be achieved?
No, we did that. We did that, David. But you also need to appreciate that we are still in a transition process. Most of the institutions are still setting up. But from the data which is available, I can confidently tell you that there's no significant change in terms of the cost. Remember, we are still doing, the government is still doing rationalization of personnel. I mean, it's something that is still ongoing. But if you look at in terms of what has been allocated to the counties, because previously we used to have those allocations. I mean, the government still used to.
Yeah, but look at it, Susan, like this. Look at the cost of representation alone. We are fixed about that. There's no more ongoing development of representation. Our wards are known, our number of representatives and the top-ups have been known. We're now discussing one-third and how this will impact on the
actually, we are not being fair, because also we also have the principle of the supremacy of the Constitution. I mean, Kenyans went outside there and they said, we are law-abiding people, and this is our Constitution, and we have to respect our Constitution. So you cannot come back like only 3 years into the implementation.
Just a minute. David, let me come to you, because you sound skeptical of the report.
Yes.
And so the question becomes, if Ms. Mangani has told us that they've looked at the numbers, they find no discernible difference, but what they do find is a lot of wastage, a lot of leakage, a lot of corruption, pilferage, and that is the problem, that they find that the cost of poor governance, the transition, poor capacity at the various levels of government, that is what is costing us, all this
and
money.
that is the cost we're looking for, because there are two things here. We've created more offices. Each of those offices is responsible for pilferage and loss, if we assume that way, that corruption is cascaded. So the more institutions you create, the more you double corruption, if corruption is a constant, okay? I'm trying to apply that logic, that we are having a lot of waste, and waste is experienced at all levels, okay? Now, let's assume we had the national government, we had lesser bureaucracy in the national government, because we created county governments which have got other labor, which is multiplied. Look at this way. Why this cost question is important is because right now, for example, we are in the midst of a discussion around achieving the one-third rule.
The two-thirds gender principle.
Do you increase the numbers? Do you top up the way we did in the last election? We have to sort out that problem. Now, that can get useful input from an audit like this, because it would advise what direction to take.
But I believe that's what they're attempting to do, Dr. Nuno.
Yeah, I think to satisfy David's curiosity, let me give you figures.
Yes.
Because I think you're actually expecting for figures. We looked at the public expenditure and we analyzed what the public expenditure was just the year prior to implementation of devolution. Because constitutional implementation started post-August 24th, 2010. But devolution and most of the institutions we see were created after the election of 2013.
That's right.
So we looked at the public expenditure in the financial year 2012-2013 and the first year of implementation of devolution, 2013-2014, because that's the only 1 year complete financial year that was actually so far witnessed the implementation of devolution.
Yes.
The second year is still running. We noticed that we looked at public expenditure as a proportion or a percentage of GDP. Okay, and in the year 2012-2013, the public expenditure, overall public expenditure, as a percentage of GDP, was 24.6%. Okay?
Yes.
And in the following year, 2013-2014, it rose marginally by 1.1% to 25.7%. However, in this financial year, 2014-2015, it's projected to rise to 29%, the reason being because of mega national projects being implemented by national government. So those are the figures.
Okay, so let's break that down. You're saying, marginal increases having nothing to do with the new infrastructure that the Constitution creates. Leakage and pilferage. Did you quantify that?
We do not quantify the amount of pilferage. We appreciate it's there. And we intend to start, most of the pilferage is being, other than duplication and institutional overlap of mandates, it's going to be felt at the devolved levels. Okay, and because we've not gone there yet, we've not been able to discern that yet.
Okay. Yeah, I find that odd, given that you're talking about the cost of bad governance. And even though you talk about going to the counties, we do know, given the amount of corruption we see nationally, that it's occurring. And so it seems odd to argue categorically that the Constitution is not too expensive to implement, that what's expensive is the cost of bad governance.
Probably what you need to notice is that this is just an interim report. This is still work in progress.
When do we expect the final report?
Auckland, end of June.
Interesting body language to what's going on.
No, let's just say around August, because what happened is that we have to get the public to participate. We still have to go to, because for us to determine, for instance, what David Makali was alluding to, when you talk about representation, then the next question will be, are we getting value? What is the value of representation? That question, the right person to answer is that Mwananchi down there. Because she's the one who can say, I'm not feeling anything. And then now when it comes to quantifying, then in our final report, we can be able to say, okay, you've created so many offices. In terms of representation, we have about 6 of them. I mean, some of them, and you analyze against the functions which they're supposed to, and you say, are you really getting the value for that? So that one is going to come. But still on the question of cost, I'll want to really persuade David to not to argue the manner in which he's arguing that because we have more institutions which have been created. These institutions have not just been created in a vacuum. They are playing a certain functions. Remember the Schedule 4 of the Constitution outlines the functions. Say this goes to the national, this goes to the county level of government. And so those functions, the institutions are playing a certain given function. So when we say there's no significant increase, the only parameters that we can use is to look at the, first of all, the allocations, which have gone down there. And
it has to be comparative with something.
Yeah,
which is with the previous
with what was there.
Without those institutions.
No, has just given me the numbers.
What is it they say? You cannot be an apologist for the Constitution.
Yes, yeah.
You are an auditor. So you must free yourself from being a defender of the Constitution. You audit it.
Yes, and see,
I think that's what David is saying.
Yeah.
I think that point has already been addressed, actually.
Yes.
We have the apologist perspective, and we have the numeric perspective
in
from
fact,
Dr.
from what
Nuno.
Dr. Nuno is saying,
right.
It seems like things are growing like in sets. So the GDP goes up, everything else moves with the GDP. Is there a way in which the two can be separated so we can have higher GDP without the cost going up so that we can actually spare more money to the economy?
Yes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That makes sense. Reverend Musimi, I'll come to you because you jumped in.
Yes, I did.
Yeah. Do you agree with that you want to see it de-linked from other sectors?
What, sorry?
David's point is that we see that the consumption, the expenditure rather, on governance is growing as a percentage of the economy. And if I understand you correctly, you're asking for numbers that show the consumption apart from the GDP.
Yeah, that's just an element of the cost analysis that I was saying. But, you know, I think what the Honourable Member is joining me in seeking is you need to disengage yourself.
No, that point is understood.
Yeah,
but I am now trying to get from you.
Radical in dissecting the cost elements of all these things that have been created by this Constitution and justify them, or not.
Can I put it in my language?
Yes.
Okay. The language that our people will understand. At independence, we were to fight ignorance, disease,
Poverty.
and poverty.
Yeah.
We now have a new constitution. Where are we on these 3 items? I think that we have done fairly well with education. I think we've done fairly well. I think we've done reasonably well with health, beginning with the NAC government. I think there were major moves from 203. And although there are problems in devolving of the health services, and there are real problems, but there is marked improvement, and I don't think we've done as well as we have done in education. With regard to poverty, the performance is poor, and the poverty is connected with corruption. It will affect insecurity, and so let us audit the constitution in terms of impact on the ground, where the rubber meets the road.
Yes.
How is corruption being felt? How are these institutions being felt by the ordinary person in Teso South, the ordinary person in Changamwe? How is it being felt? If they are less secure, if they have more problems accessing health, accessing justice, if they are poorer, then that to me is what an audit is about.
Yeah.
You can do all these numbers.
Resources need to be realigned to meet those needs.
Yeah.
That's the whole point.
Okay, it's a fairly chunky report. I did skim through it. We have bits and pieces of it here. I believe they've attempted to do that. And so if we can go through step by step what you found and what you're recommending, starting with the devolved governance system, because you have what seem to be fairly wild recommendations here. You know, you talk about the status quo, which is fine, but you also say amend the constitution to remove direct election of senators. You can have them elected from county assembly members, or amend the constitution to remove direct election of senators and have them instead elected by excuse me, constituent assemblies constituted in counties. And so take us through this, because this seems to turn everything that we have crafted so far on its head. Dr. Nuno.
Yeah, I think that's a legitimate, exposition. But we seem to have taken the Senate as an institution out of context in our constitutional architecture. Why do I say that? We have a Senate whose functions and mandate are more aligned to the Council of Provinces of South Africa. More or less.
How so?
In terms of its functions. Because we call it a Senate, which name is used in institutions in countries like America, where that Senate looks at every single legislation that emanates from the other, from the Congress. But here we have a Senate whose functions actually do not match that of the Senate of the US, but they match more, they are more or less identical to the functions of Council of Provinces. That is part-time, that represent the regions, and that have only reference to particular legislations that affect the regions.
And what's the problem with that?
It's the name. The problem is with the name. We shouldn't have called it Senate.
Okay.
We should have called it something else.
Okay.
If those are the kind of functions, we align for them.
Okay, apart from the name, did you find that we needed then to confer on it these powers that are more than just an assembly of provinces or counties in our case?
We would consider that duplication, because the role is being played by constituent representatives at the National Assembly. So we didn't see the rationale for duplicating that. What we saw is the fact that because the senator has very few functions, has nothing much to occupy them throughout, maybe it might be more legitimate for them to be eased from having to compete across a county, and therefore create easier platforms for them to come in.
Dr. Nuno, having read your report, I'll just remind us of what they said. Possible conflict in the governor and senator come from different political parties. The Senate is mandated to impeach governors. Relations between senators and governors have been poor generally, rendering implementation of devolution difficult. And so you then come to your recommendations, on how the Senate is elected. But listening to you, It sounds like you're saying abolish the Senate.
Can I say something?
Well, not really. Not really, because the Senate is part of the architecture of devolution. Devolution, you remember after independence, we had the Senate. And the beginning of devolution, of clawing back on devolution was actually removal of the Senate. So it would be dangerous to recommend or for anyone to think of getting rid of it. However, is it logical for a senator to have to contest and compete and seek votes across a county and yet not have functions? And is it rational also for a senator to have similar functions as those of the National Assembly? Then that will also amount to duplication. So we need to do a balance between avoiding duplication and easing, the challenge they face in getting the mandate of the people.
The senators would argue that they do have a function.
Can I ask him a question?
Okay.
Right. You interviewed members of the National Assembly.
We did.
Did you interview senators?
They declined. We have that in writing.
Why?
Really? We don't know.
Why
they just thought we were assembled by the National Assembly, and they said we have nothing to do with you. So that's where we stand now. We haven't talked to any of them.
You are auditing the Constitution.
Can I make a contribution to that?
The creation of that Constitution.
You saw the intelligence, it didn't work.
Okay, my input in that is that we have one of the challenge of implementation is the conflict, as we say, conflict between institutions. And the conflict,
different arms of government,
but in the Senate in particular, what you're finding there is the problem with the design, the manner in which it was designed. Because one, if the mandate of the Senate is to protect the interest of the counties, then one, it cannot oversee the county. It must have a strong linkage with the county. They're supposed actually to be the delegates of the county government. But here you have a Senate which is elected directly by the people. You have a governor who is elected directly by the people. So there is that competition. And now you have a bicameral system where you have the Senate and you have the National Assembly. And the Senate, the Constitution says your mandate is to protect the interest of the counties. But they feel they have been elected by a wider constituency than the National Assembly. So what we are saying, the intention, if you look at the underpinning...
Let me stop you there, because I'm struggling to understand how looking after the interests of a county conflicts with oversighting that county.
Okay, in the county you have the county assembly. If you look at the national system, where you have the National Assembly oversighting the national executive and those other arms and the judicial, let's say, the national government. And then you have the county assembly, who are the representative of the people, who are supposed then to be directly oversighting the county, the government at that level. So if you have a Senate which is supposed to protect the interest of the county, so then the Senate's role, and that's one of the proposals you're putting there, the Senate role then should be purposively interpreted to mean to strengthen their oversight role, to strengthen the oversight functions of the county assemblies in the county, because you cannot, you are like a delegate of the county, you cannot oversight. So that's where the challenge is. And as much as we still have senators who are directly elected, you're still going to have problems, because they feel, what will you say, I'm elected and I'm responsible to my constituents, but you're telling me there are certain issues which I cannot discuss. I mean, you can't lock them out on discussing other issues.
So are you struggling as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is very fundamental issues. The problem is that the nature of the Senate and the National Assembly architecture is adversarial.
Yes.
In fact, the whole notion that they protect the interests means against somebody else.
Yes.
Which means against
the National Assembly and the national government.
Which is not, I think, which wasn't the intention, or it was, a misperception.
Is that a semantic issue, or is it a cultural issue? Because Reverend Simi, I think you were in the news last night talking about this culture of mistrust in the country.
Yeah.
It's individuals and not necessarily the institutions. Because if you had reasonable individuals, then you wouldn't have such a, strained working relationship.
I described it as a national character. It went beyond individuals, it went beyond institutions. It's a national epidemic. It goes way beyond individuals and way beyond the institutions. It's what we are slowly becoming. People who basically, and I think it is the way we played our politics for the last 50 years, people who find it very difficult to trust others outside of our own. Our own basically means community, economic institutions, that sort of thing. That's what I was saying. But I asked the question very deliberately. You are here talking about the Senate. Did you interview the senators? Did you interview the senators?
The reason why we didn't have a meeting with the Senate is because we requested to meet them, and they said
they declined.
Who appointed? They said who appointed you?
Who exactly?
I mean, the speaker wrote back to us and said this house is not going to honor your request because of who appointed you. It's the National Assembly without consulting with us.
That's on record.
It's on record, and so you can see even those conflicts.
And so hopefully, I'm assuming that some of them are.
However, we met with some.
Will you try again?
However, yes, we're going to try again. But however, we met with a few senators in their own individual capacity, because this exercise demanded that we meet with a number of stakeholders. So in the CORD leadership, we were able to meet with Senator Rengo, with Honorable Senator Halwale. Yeah, I think we met the two of them.
And on the Jubilee side?
On the Jubilee side, of course. We met the Jubilee leadership in the government. We met with the lead of minority. I mean, there is a list of them. We met with the government.
Within the Senate, though?
Within the Senate, no.
No one from the Jubilee side?
Nobody responded. Even within CORD leadership, we were not able to meet with Senator Wetangula. I mean, they, at some point, they'll say, yeah, we agree, we're going to meet you this time, and then they just...
Not honor the...
Yeah, but then we received a letter from the Speaker of the Senate saying we cannot meet with you because it's the National Assembly.
So let's, we've established that the Senate has been uncooperative.
But I think for the record, those two senators also, Honorable Halwale and Orengo, we met them in the company when we had an appointment with the court principal, Honorable Odinga. So they were in his company, but not in their individual capacity as senators. We were not able to access any senator.
In hindsight...
Okay, just a minute. We have to take a break, sorry. This is Cheche. We're live on Citizen TV. We'll be back discussing the cost of implementing the Constitution right after this break.